I was standing in my father's study, the one room his new wife rarely entered, when she delivered the line that snapped something inside me. She didn't knock. She didn't soften her voice. She simply looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's time to move on. You need to let go of whatever claim you think you have here." She said it like she was granting me a kindness, like she was being patient with a child who refused to understand the rules of the adult world. But I was not a child. I was a 62-year-old woman who had just buried the man who raised me through every storm of my life. My father had been gone for 4 days. 4 days. And she was already talking about claims, space, moving on. I didn't answer her at first. I just stared at her. This woman who had been married to my father for barely 18 months. This woman who wore grief like a borrowed coat that didn't quite fit. This woman who already had movers scheduled for the following week, though my father's scent still lingered on the collar of his favorite jacket hanging by the door. She stepped closer, her arms folded. "You're holding us back from settling the estate," she said. "You need to accept that your father wanted me to take care of things. You hovering around is only making this harder." Hovering. That was the word she used. Hovering, as though I were some unwelcome ghost drifting through my own childhood home. I finally spoke. "What exactly do you think I'm here to claim?" Her smile was thin. "Nothing you'll miss. Trust me." And with that, she left the room, closing the door behind her with a soft, deliberate click. But she had made one mistake. She had delivered that final line in my father's study, where every drawer had its own quiet story, and where the truth, his truth, waited patiently for the day someone would need it. I didn't know then what I would find, or how much of my father's life he had already safeguarded from the chaos he sensed approaching. But I do know this. Her words, "It's time to move on," would become the beginning of her unraveling, and the beginning of my inheritance. Not the money, not the house, something much deeper. Because when I opened the top drawer of my father's desk that night, I found the first breadcrumb he had left for me. And that was the moment everything changed. My name is Margaret Elise Holloway, and at the time of all this, I was 62 years old. I've lived a quieter life than some, louder than others. I raised 2 children, survived a difficult divorce, worked 35 years as a high school librarian, and learned that peace is something you must choose every day, even when anger feels easier. I am not impulsive. I am not dramatic. And revenge, if that's what you'd call what I eventually pursued, is not something I take lightly. But I do believe in truth. I believe in accountability. And I believe that when someone tries to erase your history for their own gain, you don't step aside politely. You stand your ground, even if your voice shakes. My relationship with my father was layered, like most family stories are. He was steady, intelligent, and private. He had a way of listening that made you feel as though your words had weight. After my mother passed 20 years ago, he rebuilt his life slowly. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious until her. I won't use her name here. Not because she doesn't deserve it, but because I refuse to immortalize the person she pretended to be. She was 23 years younger than my father. A polished woman with a curated softness and a talent for slipping into roles that suited her environment. When they married, I accepted it. Quietly, yes, but sincerely. My father deserved companionship, even if the match felt uneven. And yet, from the very beginning, something inside me tightened whenever she smiled too long or offered details that shifted slightly each time she told them. She was a woman who edited herself the way some people edit photos, always smoothing, brightening, removing shadows. Still, my father seemed happy, calm, content. So I stepped back. But now, standing in his study after his funeral, with her telling me what I could and could not claim, I realized how little I had allowed myself to question. She miscalculated something essential. I may be quiet, but I am not blind. And I have lived long enough to recognize the scent of deceit, even when it's wearing perfume. The drawer I opened that night contained something my father never needed to explain to me, because he knew I would understand exactly what it meant. It was a letter, sealed and dated 2 months before his death. Addressed to me. Only me. My hand trembled as I peeled the flap open. Inside was a single line, written in my father's crisp handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means the storm has arrived. Follow the instructions in the folder beneath this letter. And trust your instincts. They're sharper than mine ever were." I reached beneath the letter, heart pounding. And that was when I found the folder. The one that would expose everything. I should start by saying that my father was not a man prone to melodrama. If he used the word storm, It was because he saw the clouds gathering long before anyone else did. Growing up, he taught me that a family's greatest strength comes from honesty, even when honesty is painful. My mother, gentle and intuitive, believed the same. Our home wasn't perfect, but it was anchored. Solid. Built on truth spoken with care. When my mother died, my father folded inward in small ways. He stopped humming as he cooked, stopped wearing the cologne she loved, stopped hosting the Sunday dinners she always insisted on. But he did not become cold. He became careful. I stepped into the role of quiet support without ever being asked. I visited weekly. I helped with paperwork. I learned to listen the way he had always listened to me. So when he remarried, I truly tried to open a place in my heart for this woman who now occupied chapters of his life I would never fully see. But the dynamic shifted. My father and I still loved each other deeply, but access became thinner, filtered through her presence like sunlight passing through tinted glass. He became more private, more restrained. He still called me, but shorter conversations. Still invited me over, but she always hovered nearby. And then there were the financial choices. Small at first. A new joint account. A new car, registered under her name. A loan she said she needed for a business idea, though no business ever appeared. I didn't press. People in love do strange things, I told myself. People in grief do stranger things. But my father was still methodical. Still the man who kept receipts for appliances purchased 20 years earlier. So his increasing silence around money, that was new. And unsettling. When he fell ill, a rapid decline, faster than any of us expected, she controlled the narrative. She chose the doctors. She fielded calls. She limited visits. But my father always found a way to speak to me privately, even if briefly. Once, just weeks before his death, he held my hand and said, "You have a strong mind, Margaret. Promise me you'll use it." I didn't understand then. Now, with the folder in my lap, I felt that same warning echoing in the walls of his study. Inside the folder were documents, contracts, emails, bank statements, photocopies of checks, and a timeline, neatly typed, of every questionable financial decision he had made since marrying her. At the bottom, a note. I was not blind, only patient. If anything happens to me, these will protect you. And reveal her. My breath caught in my throat. Because this wasn't just a file. This was evidence. Evidence of betrayal, one I had not yet fully grasped. The betrayal began small enough that someone less attentive than my father might have never noticed. A few transfers labeled as household expenses. Withdrawals for renovations. Charges from boutiques in cities she claimed she'd never visited. But the deeper I read, the clearer the pattern became. She had been siphoning his money, quietly, consistently, and with increasing confidence. The folder revealed $18,000 withdrawn over 6 months, each labeled as medical supplies he never received. $42,500 transferred into a separate account listed under her maiden name. A $75,000 loan she supposedly needed to buy into a business partnership, which, according to the investigation notes my father typed himself, never existed. But the worst was at the bottom of the stack. A line item of $450,000, moved from my father's long-term investment account into a private trust created only 3 months before his death. A trust one had never heard of. A trust she controlled. Except there was something she didn't know. Something she couldn't have known. My father had revoked her trusteeship. Silently. Legally. Completely. 3 weeks before he died, he reassigned the trust. Every cent of the $450,000 to me. And he never told her. I sat there in the study, trembling, realizing exactly what she had intended. She hadn't just hoped to benefit from his passing. She had been constructing a financial funnel, piece by piece, planning for a future where she walked away enriched while I was left with scraps of memory. And she would have succeeded, if not for the next set of documents. Signed statements from 2 lawyers notarized. A revised will. A medical directive naming me as his decision-maker. And emails, printed, highlighted, showing warnings my father sent her about her spending. Her responses were clipped. Cold. Accusatory. In one, she wrote, "If you don't trust me, what's the point of being married?" In another, "Your daughter is poisoning you against me." And finally, "When you're gone, everything will settle the way it's meant to." Everything will settle the way it's meant to. That one haunted me, because she had said almost the same thing to me at the funeral. And now, I finally understood her confidence. She believed the money was hers. She believed she had manipulated the system tightly enough that I could never challenge her. She believed, in essence, that she had already won. But my father had outplayed her. Quietly, precisely, lovingly. He had left me not only the truth. The next morning, I began the process my father had silently prepared me for. I contacted Attorney Lewis, the same estate lawyer my father had worked with for over a decade. When I explained what I found, he didn't sound surprised, only resigned. Your father suspected this, he said. He tried to protect himself, but he also tried to protect you from worrying while he was still alive. He asked me to bring everything. Every document. Every note. Every time-stamped email. When I laid the folder out on his conference table, he read quietly, pausing only to circle details with a navy fountain pen. This, he finally said, tapping the trust revision, is legally airtight. And she doesn't know? I asked. He shook his head. She believes she controls the trust. She believes she can push you out. Then he leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. But your father made sure you were the only beneficiary. The strategy unfolded piece by piece. First, verify the authenticity of every document. My father had already notarized most of them. Second, secure the trust before she attempted to access or move it. Third, prepare for confrontation, not emotional but legal. Meanwhile, I watched her behavior closely. At the house, she became increasingly agitated. She took calls in whispered tones. I overheard her mention accounts needing to be finalized. I saw a stack of moving boxes appear in the living room. She was planning something, and planning it quickly. The confirmation came when I checked the mailbox the next afternoon and found a letter addressed to her from a brokerage firm. The firm that held the original $450,000. I didn't open it, of course. But I didn't need to. I knew its purpose. She was trying to move the funds. The very funds she no longer had access to. That night, I emailed Attorney Lewis. His reply came within minutes. She will learn tomorrow that the trust is no longer hers. Do not engage. And do not leave the property. I didn't sleep. I sat in my father's study, surrounded by his books, breathing in the calm he had always radiated, even in the face of storms. And just before dawn, I found something else, something tucked behind a row of old legal texts. A second envelope. Unmarked except for my initials. Inside was a copy of a voicemail transcription from my father's doctor. The date was 2 months before he died. My father had asked a very specific question. How much time do I realistically have to ensure my daughter is protected? I felt the breath leave my lungs. He knew, long before any of us did. And he planned everything with that knowledge. The confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or a lawyer's office. It happened in the kitchen, quiet, sunlit, deceptively peaceful. She stormed in holding paperwork, her face mottled with rage. What did you do? She hissed. I stayed seated at the table, hands wrapped calmly around a mug of tea. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, she snapped, tossing the papers down. The trust. The accounts. They said I'm not authorized. You had something changed. You manipulated him. I looked at her steadily. He made his choices long before he died. She laughed, sharp, brittle. He adored me. He would never. But I interrupted gently. He adored you enough to give you chances. Many, actually. But he also saw who you were. Her eyes flicked with something. Fear? Shock? I couldn't tell. You think you can take everything? She spat. No, I said. I'm taking only what he left me, which includes the trust, the house, and his estate, all legally documented. She went silent. Too silent. Then her voice shifted, colder, calculating. You don't want to fight with me. But I stood. I'm not fighting you. I'm acknowledging what already is. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. He told me everything was going to be mine. He promised. I shook my head. He promised to take care of you. And he did. He left you a stipend, a car, a year of covered housing. But he did not leave you his legacy. She blinked rapidly, as if the words physically struck her. Then she whispered, You don't deserve it. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the clarity my father had given me in that last hospital conversation. I don't need to deserve it. It was his decision. For a moment, her mask slipped. The polished softness shattered, revealing something sharp beneath. You'll regret this, she said. But the power in her threat had evaporated. Because she finally understood. The house was no longer hers. The money was no longer hers. The narrative she built was collapsing under its own weight. And I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't even angry. I simply felt resolved. Because this wasn't about winning. This was about honoring my father's final act of love. The downfall began quietly, the way all unravelings of ego do. First, she tried appealing to pity, sobbing in the living room loud enough for neighbors to hear. Then anger, slammed doors, sharp accusations whispered into her phone. Then negotiation, offering to split things fairly if I would undo the unnecessary legal complications. But when those tactics failed, she resorted to the last refuge of a cornered manipulator. She attempted to paint herself as the victim. She called relatives, friends, people who barely knew her. She claimed I had forced her out, that I had stolen her inheritance, that my father had been coerced. But truth has a patience deceit lacks. And quietly, steadily, her version unraveled. The lawyer informed her formally of the estate distribution, each detail irrefutable. The trust mine. The house mine. The investment accounts mine. She wasn't being evicted. She was being transitioned into the year-long housing arrangement my father had left her. A safety net he crafted with compassion, not obligation. Her expression when she read the legal letter. I will never forget it. Shock. Disbelief. Humiliation. She packed her things in silence. The movers she had scheduled, originally to clear the house of my father's belongings, ended up carrying out her own instead. She left behind traces of herself in shallow ways. Half-empty perfume bottles, receipts for expensive clothing my father never knew about, a stack of glossy lifestyle magazines. But the deeper absence was hers alone to feel. Her power was gone. Her comfort gone. Her illusion of control, dismantled with documents she never knew existed. And for someone who built her world on manipulation, the silence of consequence was its own kind of justice. No shouting. No public spectacle. Just the quiet weight of truth settling exactly where my father intended. By the end of the week, she was gone. And for the first time in months, the house breathed again. After she moved out, the house felt different. Lighter. Quieter in a way that was comforting instead of suffocating. I spent my mornings walking through the rooms, reconnecting with spaces my father had loved. The study with its soft leather chair, the garden he tended every spring, the kitchen where he made pancakes for my children when they were small. Grief softened into something more bearable. Something I could hold without breaking. I used part of the inheritance to restore the house. Not lavishly, but lovingly. I refinished his study desk. Repaired the creaking staircase. Replanted the garden with the same flowers my mother once favored. The $450,000 trust remained untouched for several months. I wanted to understand its weight before making decisions. One evening, while sorting through my father's belongings, I found a handwritten note tucked inside a book of poetry. Do something joyful with it. Something you'll carry forward. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I established a scholarship fund in my parents' names, supporting local students pursuing literature, teaching, or library sciences. Careers my father respected. Careers he nurtured in me. The rest I invested conservatively, choosing stability over extravagance. Life became peaceful again. Not perfect. Not free of sorrow. But honest. And I learned something unexpected. Justice doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives with stillness, with clarity, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth held firm. My father trusted me to navigate the storm he foresaw. And I had done exactly that. If there is one thing I've learned in my 62 years, it is this. People reveal who they are not in moments of abundance, but in moments of opportunity. My father's wife saw opportunity in his vulnerability. She saw his trust as a door left unlocked. She saw his generosity as a weakness. But my father understood something she never could. Real power lies not in possession, but in preparation. He left me the truth. He left me protection. And he left me the wisdom to act without anger, without cruelty, without vengeance rooted in destruction. Justice is not dramatic. It is deliberate. And revenge, ethical revenge, is nothing more than refusing to let deceit write the final chapter of your story. So when she told me to move on, she meant to move out of the way. To move quietly. To move so she could take what she felt entitled to. Instead, I moved with purpose. I moved with clarity. I moved with the $450,000 my father intended for me long before she realized the storm was coming. And in doing so, I honored him. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Trust your instincts. Document everything. And never underestimate the quiet strength you carry. especially when someone tries to convince you it's time to step aside. Sometimes moving on doesn't mean letting go. Sometimes it means stepping into the truth someone tried to hide from you. And sometimes it means walking away with everything they thought you'd never find.